The lake cabin always felt like a secret world to him, a quiet place hidden among tall trees where the sound of water hitting the shore was louder than the noise of the city. He had worked hard all week, and now he wanted nothing more than a simple weekend of peace. His Jeep, dusty from long drives, carried not just his personal belongings, but something more important this time: special equipment from an assignment he had been trusted with. To anyone else, the boxes and cases in the back of the Jeep might look confusing, but to him, it was just part of his job. He locked it carefully with a thick chain, knowing it needed to stay safe. The Jeep wasn't just transportation for him this weekend. It was something like a partner, holding items that mattered a lot. The cabin sat on a narrow road not far from other lake houses. The neighbors here were familiar faces, though he didn't know them well. Some liked to smile and wave, others kept to themselves. And then there was the HOA president, the woman most people jokingly called Karen because of her habit of interfering with everything. She was always on the lookout for things to correct, scolding kids for riding bikes too fast, or sending notes about garbage bins not being rolled in on time. He had heard about her before he even bought the place, but until now he had managed to stay clear of her strict attention. This Saturday morning was warm, the kind that made the air smell fresh and the lake shimmer in the sun. He parked the Jeep near the cabin and started unpacking a few small items: groceries, a fishing pole, and a bag of clothes. He left the rest locked up in the vehicle. As he carried a bag to the porch, he noticed movement from across the street. Karen stood there, wearing her wide-brimmed hat and holding a clipboard as if she was ready for an inspection. She looked directly at the Jeep and frowned, her lips tightening like she had just discovered a problem that needed urgent fixing. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying across the quiet lane. "Is that your Jeep?" He nodded politely, setting down the bag. "Yes, ma'am. That's mine." "You can't park it there," she said, marching a little closer. "And what's with that chain? It looks abandoned, like some junk vehicle taking up space. We have rules here, you—" "No," he sighed inwardly. This was the first real conversation he was having with her, and it was exactly as the neighbors had warned. "It's not abandoned," he explained calmly. "It's locked because I've got important equipment inside. I'll be here for the weekend. It's not breaking any rules." Karen adjusted her hat, squinting at the Jeep. "Equipment? What kind of equipment? This neighborhood has standards. We don't allow people to store things outside in vehicles. If you have items, they should go inside your cabin." He shook his head. "I can't do that. Some of this equipment has to stay where it is. I've already got permission to keep my Jeep here." She folded her arms, looking unconvinced. "Permission? I don't think so. Not from me, and I'm the HOA president. All vehicles must follow the guidelines. That one looks like it hasn't. Moved in weeks. It's an eyesore." He wanted to laugh, but he stayed polite. The Jeep wasn't rusty or broken. It was clean, sturdy, and obviously in use. But Karen seemed determined to make it a problem. He tried again. "Look, I understand you're just doing your job, but I need you to trust me on this. That Jeep must stay locked exactly as it is. No one should touch it. It's very important." Instead of easing her concerns, his words seemed to make her more suspicious. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice as if she was uncovering some grand secret. "Important? Are you hiding something? Because if this is some kind of storage for, I don't know, things you don't want people to see, then I have every right to get it removed. I won't let my neighborhood turn into a dumping ground." He realized then that arguing wouldn't help. Karen wasn't listening. She was building her own story in her head. He simply nodded, took his bags, and headed inside his cabin, hoping that if he ignored her, she would lose interest. But Karen didn't lose interest. For the rest of the day, she walked past the Jeep more than once, each time pausing to look at the lock and the windows. From his porch, he could see her jotting down notes on her clipboard. It was as if she was gathering evidence for a case against him. He could only shake his head. All he wanted was a quiet weekend, and already it felt like he was in the middle of a small-town drama. Later, as the sun began to set, He lit a small fire pit and cooked dinner outside. The air smelled of pine needles and smoke, and the sound of frogs began to rise from the water. For a moment, he forgot about the Jeep, the lock, and the neighbor. But just as he was finishing his meal, he heard the sound of footsteps on gravel. Karen was back, walking directly toward his porch. "I've been reviewing the rules," she announced, holding up a stapled packet of HOA bylaws. "And according to Section 4, Article 3, no vehicle may remain on community property if it is chained or locked in a way that makes it appear abandoned. That Jeep qualifies. I'm giving you until tomorrow morning to remove it, or I'll have it towed." He set down his plate and looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, I respect the rules, but that Jeep is not abandoned. It's mine, it's registered, and it's here with me. More importantly, it cannot be moved. If you tow it, you'll be making a very big mistake." Karen lifted her chin, her expression stiff. "We'll see about that. I'll give you until morning." When she finally walked away, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the Jeep parked by the trees. He had tried to warn her. He had tried to explain. But Karen wasn't interested in explanations. She wanted control. He could only hope she would think twice before taking action, because the consequences of tampering with that Jeep would be far bigger than she imagined. That night, the lake grew quiet, and the cabin settled into darkness. The Jeep sat under the moonlight, chained and steady like a silent guardian. He lay awake for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees, wondering if Karen would really dare to test his warning. Somehow, he had a feeling this weekend was going to be anything but peaceful. The morning sunlight slipped through the tall trees, lighting up the cabin porch and shining across the Jeep. Birds sang, and the air was cool and crisp. But inside the cabin, he woke up with a sense of unease. His mind went back to the conversation with Karen the night before. Her words, her certainty, and the way she waved that packet of HOA rules, it all pointed to one thing. She wasn't going to let the matter rest. He had tried to warn her kindly, but he knew people like her often believed they were above reason. He made coffee and sat on the porch, hoping the quiet of the lake would calm his thoughts. For a while, it worked. The sight of water rippling, the smell of pine, and the simple comfort of his warm cup gave him peace. But then he saw Karen again. She was walking briskly down the lane, this time with two other neighbors. She pointed directly at the Jeep, her voice carrying even though he couldn't hear every word. The neighbors nodded politely, though from their faces it was clear they were just trying to avoid an argument with her. Karen, however, looked determined. He finished his coffee and walked toward the Jeep, standing by it as if to protect it. When she saw him, she came closer, clipboard in hand. "I warned you," she said firmly. "You had all night to deal with this, and yet the Jeep is still here. This is a violation, plain and simple. I spoke to a tow company this morning, and they confirmed they can come today. If you don't move it yourself, I'll make the call." Her tone was sharp, but he didn't let himself get angry. "I told you, this Jeep cannot be touched. It isn't just a vehicle. It's part of something much bigger. If you interfere, you'll regret it, not because of me, but because of what it contains. Please, just leave it where it is. I'm not hurting anyone." Karen tapped her pen against her clipboard impatiently. "You keep saying it's important, but you refuse to explain. What are you hiding? This community deserves to know. We don't allow secrets here." He could see the neighbors shifting uncomfortably. One of them, an older man with a fishing hat, spoke quietly. "Karen, maybe let it go. He's not bothering anyone. The Jeep's not blocking traffic." But Karen turned on him quickly. "If we ignore one violation, then the rules mean nothing. Today it's a Jeep. Tomorrow it's broken down boats or trash piles. This is how neighborhoods lose their value." The man shrugged and stepped back, unwilling to argue further. Karen looked back at him, eyes narrowed. "I'll give you one last chance," she said. "Move the Jeep by this afternoon, or I'll call the tow truck myself." He looked at her, calm but serious. You'll be making a huge mistake if you do that. I can't explain everything, but trust me when I say this. If that Jeep is touched, the consequences will fall on you, not me." Karen let out a short laugh, though it sounded more like a scoff. "That's what people say when they know they're in the wrong. You can't scare me with vague threats. I've been running this HOA for years and no one intimidates me. I'm, doing what's right for this neighborhood." She spun around and walked back toward her house, the clipboard under her arm. The two neighbors gave him sympathetic looks before following behind her. He stood there for a moment, staring at the Jeep, wondering how far she would go. He had faced difficult situations before, but there was something unique about this one. It wasn't about criminals or strangers. It was about a neighbor, someone who lived just a few doors away, who thought she knew best. The rest of the morning passed slowly. He tried to distract himself by cleaning the cabin, organizing supplies, and even walking down to the dock to throw a line in the water. The lake was calm, but his mind was restless. Every few minutes, he glanced back up the lane, half expecting to see a tow truck pulling in. By mid-afternoon, his prediction came true. He heard the distant rumble of a large vehicle, and soon enough, a tow truck appeared, rolling slowly down the lane toward his cabin. Karen walked proudly in front of it, pointing the driver toward the Jeep like a general leading troops into battle. He walked quickly up the slope, reaching the Jeep before they did. The tow truck driver, a burly man with grease-stained hands, stepped out and looked at the Jeep with confusion. "You want me to take this?" he asked Karen. "Yes," she said firmly. "It's abandoned, chained up, and violating community standards." The driver scratched his head. "Doesn't look abandoned to me. It's in good shape. Belongs to you?" he asked, turning toward the man standing beside it. "Yes, it does," he replied calmly. "And it's not going anywhere. This vehicle is exactly where it needs to be. I've already explained that," Karen huffed. "He's lying. He's hiding something inside. That lock proves it. Who locks up a Jeep in their own driveway unless they don't want people finding out what's in there?" The driver raised an eyebrow, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I don't like touching vehicles if the owner's right here saying not to. Could cause trouble." Karen stepped closer, her voice lowering but her intensity growing. "You have the HOA's permission. I'm the president and I'm telling you it must be moved. Cut the lock if you have to." The man at the Jeep stood tall. "Don't touch it," he said firmly. His voice wasn't raised, but there was a weight in it that made even the driver pause. "I'm warning you both right now. This Jeep isn't just mine. It's connected to official work. If you tamper with it, you'll regret it." Karen threw her hands up. "See? He admits it's not just his. That means he's storing things he shouldn't be. This neighborhood won't tolerate it." She turned to the driver again. "Do your job. Tow it." The driver hesitated, caught between the two. "Look, I don't want any trouble. If you want me to cut a lock and tow this thing against the owner's wishes, I need paperwork. Police order, something legal. Otherwise, I could get sued." Karen's face flushed, but she wasn't ready to give up. "Fine," she said through clenched teeth. "If you won't do it, I'll get the authorities involved myself." With that, she stormed back toward her house, her phone already in hand. The driver shrugged at the man by the Jeep. "Sorry about this. She's a tough one. I'll wait in the truck. If she calls the cops, I don't want to be in the middle of it." The man nodded, his jaw tight. He knew what was coming. Karen was about to make the call that would bring even more eyes onto the situation, and while he wasn't afraid of the truth, he knew she was about to walk herself straight into something much bigger than a neighborhood squabble. As he leaned against the Jeep, watching Karen disappear into her house, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The sound of the lake seemed distant now, replaced by the hum of tension in the air. He had warned her again and again, but some people could only learn the hard way. The afternoon moved slowly after the first tow truck left. The driver had decided not to get involved, and he rolled away with a small wave, leaving the lane quiet again. For a little while, it almost felt normal. He fixed a loose screen on the porch. He swept pine needles off the steps, He checked the chain on the Jeep and made sure the lock was secure. He told himself that maybe the situation would cool down now that the first attempt had failed. But deep inside, he knew Karen was not the kind of person to let something go once she had decided it was her mission. He needed a bag of ice and a couple of things for dinner, so he decided to make a quick trip to the small marina store down the road. It was a 10-minute drive around the lake. He looked down the lane one more time. No tow truck, no movement. Karen's curtains were drawn, but he had the strange sense that she was still watching. He locked his cabin, glanced at the Jeep with its thick chain, and told himself he would be back in 20 minutes. He took his other car, rolled slowly past the quiet houses, and pulled onto the main road. As soon as he turned the bend and his car disappeared behind the trees, Karen stepped out of her house. She had been waiting. She checked the lane to make sure no one else was around, then dialed her phone with quick, firm taps. The first tow company had refused, but she wasn't done trying. She had spent the last hour calling around and finally found a company that was new to the area and eager for business. They did not ask many questions. They said they could be there in 20 minutes. She also had a plan. If the lock stopped, then she would help solve that problem. 15 minutes later, a different tow truck rumbled toward the cabin. It was smaller than the first one, the paint a little faded, the driver much younger. He pulled up in front of the Jeep and cut the engine. He looked at the chain, the lock, the steady way the Jeep sat under the shade, and then he looked at Karen. She stood straighter, clipboard tucked under her arm like she was greeting a guest of honor. "This is the one?" the driver asked. "Yes," she said. "Abandoned, chained, and in violation. The owner refuses to move it. We have community standards to protect." The driver rubbed the back of his neck. "You got proof it's abandoned?" "It's been here for days," Karen said quickly, then added, "and the owner is not present." She did not mention she had seen him leave only minutes before. "I'm the HOA president. We have the authority to clear it." The driver walked around the Jeep once more, careful and slow. He saw the chain through the wheel and around the frame, and the heavy lock, thick and solid. He leaned down to examine it. "I can hook it," he said, "but that lock is a problem." Karen's expression tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "I brought something for that." She turned and opened the trunk of her car. Inside was a large pair of bolt cutters with red handles. She lifted them with both hands and walked back to the Jeep. The driver raised his eyebrows. "You sure about this?" he asked. "It's community property," Karen said. "We can't leave items chained up like this. It looks like junk, and it lowers the standard of the neighborhood. I'll take responsibility." The driver hesitated, glancing from the cutters to the Jeep to the quiet cabins around them. No one else was outside. The lane was still. The lake air felt heavy and still, too, like the moment before a storm when the wind disappears. He stepped aside. Karen positioned the bolt cutters around the lock. The metal was thick, but the cutters were new and sharp. She set her jaw and pressed down. At first the lock resisted, but then with a hard squeeze and a small grinding sound, the shank gave way. The cut wasn't loud, more a dull snap than a clang, but in the silence of the lane, it felt like a shout. Karen pulled the broken lock free and looked at it in her palm, a faint smile on her face. "Done," she said softly. What she didn't see was the tiny change that her action caused inside the Jeep. Near the rear panel, hidden behind trim, a small sensor felt the sudden release of tension and registered it as tampering. It did not flash lights or sound a horn. It did something quieter. It sent a message. A silent signal traveled through a small unit tucked neatly under the floor, the kind of unit no one would notice unless they knew where to look. That message went out to a system that watched over such things, a kind of "I'm being touched" whisper, sent to people who understood what it meant. Nothing on the outside changed, but an invisible line had been crossed. The driver went to work, sliding the hook under the Jeep with practiced hands. He lowered the winch and began to set up the tow. As he leaned closer, he glanced through the back window and paused. Inside, he could see two foam-lined cases, neatly strapped, each with a simple label in small letters. There was also a closed duffel, clean and plain, and a coil of cable sitting in a tidy loop. Nothing looked messy or careless. It looked deliberate, organized, professional. The driver said softly. He straightened and looked at Karen. You sure this is abandoned? Looks kind of official. Official? Karen repeated, waving the word away. All kinds of people claim things are official to avoid the rules. He told me it was important. Everyone says their stuff is important, but our standards don't bend for special stories. This needs to go. The driver didn't move. I don't like this, he admitted. Owner says no, and now there's stuff inside that might be, I don't know, sensitive. If I take this, I'm in the middle. You're not in the middle, Karen said in a firm voice. You're helping this community. You're doing your job. She nodded at the winch. Hook it. He gulped and looked up the lane, as if hoping someone would appear and tell him to stop. But the lane was still empty. He knelt again, guiding the hook into place. Far away, the man at the marina store picked up a bag of ice and a carton of eggs. He checked his phone and saw a brief, quiet notice, a message he knew to watch for, a message that meant the thing. He had warned about what was happening. It had only a few words and a simple timestamp, but it made his chest go tight. He thanked the cashier, hurried to the car, and started back around the lake with steady, focused hands. He didn't race. He knew that speed would not help his cause. He needed to arrive calm. He needed to arrive ready to say as little as possible and do the right thing. Back at the cabin lane, the tow truck's winch began to whine softly. The Jeep shifted an inch as the cable took strain. The chain that had been wrapped through the wheel now hung loose, the broken lock still lying in Karen's hand like a trophy. A couple of neighbors heard the low mechanical sound and wandered outside, curious. The older man with the fishing hat stopped at the end of his driveway. A younger neighbor across the lane lifted his phone and started recording, not to cause trouble, but because he remembered how yesterday's attempt had fizzled out and this looked like it might become another story for the community chat group. The Jeep moved another inch. As the frame shifted, the small unit under the floor sent a second silent notice, something like a progress update to the same place that heard the first whisper. It was not dramatic. It was simple and clear. At the same moment, a soft LED inside the dashboard, hidden from the outside, blinked once, as if nodding to itself. Outside, no one noticed. Almost got it, the driver said, more to his own nerves than to anyone else. He kept his hands steady. He had done hundreds of tows, cars with expired tags, trucks blocking driveways, a couple of boats on trailers. This felt different, but he kept going because that was what he had agreed to do. Karen stood with her shoulders squared, the bolt cutters now resting against her leg. She could feel the eyes of the neighbors on her, and she liked the feeling of being the person who kept order. In her mind, she was doing something good, stopping a small problem before it became a pattern. She did not see herself as stubborn. She saw herself as right. The older man in the fishing hat took a step forward. "Karen," he called gently, "maybe wait for the owner. This doesn't seem wise." She didn't look back at him. The owner had a chance. He ignored the rules. "We can't allow that, or the rules mean nothing." The younger neighbor kept his phone steady, zooming in on the winch, the cable, the slow movement of the Jeep's tires. He said quietly, "This is going to blow up on the group chat." But no one answered. The man rounded the final curve and saw the tow truck before he saw the Jeep. He drew a slow breath and parked at the edge of the lane. He stepped out, set the bag of ice on the porch, and walked toward the truck with a calm, even pace. The driver noticed him first and froze with his hand near the winch control. Karen turned and then lifted her chin. "You had your chance," she said. "This is being removed. You can collect it from the yard later." He looked at the broken lock in her hand and then at the chain drooping like a loose ribbon. He didn't raise his voice. "You cut it." "I did what the community needed," she replied. He nodded once, as if that single movement was a note in a quiet song only he could hear. "Please step back from the vehicle," he said to both of them, his tone courteous but firm. "Do not touch it again. This is not just mine, and it is not an ordinary vehicle." The driver swallowed. "Sir, I don't want trouble, but she said—" "I understand what she said," the man answered. "I told her yesterday this Jeep cannot be moved, and I warned her why. I can't explain the details. But if you tow it, you will create a very real problem that none of us want." Karen made a small sound of disbelief. "You keep using that excuse. If it's so important, why H?" The first car turned into the lane with its lights on but no siren. The red and blue glow moved across the trees and cabin walls like soft waves. A second car followed. Both came to a smooth stop near the tow truck. The air felt still and careful, like everyone had agreed without speaking to use quiet voices now. The driver stepped back from the winch. The younger neighbor lowered his phone. The man stood beside the Jeep with his hands relaxed at his sides, his face calm, his gaze steady. 2 officers stepped out. They moved with a calm rhythm, not hurried, not slow, as if they already knew something about what they might find. The first officer, a woman with a clear, steady voice, looked from the tow cable to the broken lock in Karen's hand to the man by the Jeep. The second officer glanced inside the Jeep through the window, then looked toward the man with a small nod of recognition that he tried to hide. It didn't look like surprise. It looked like confirmation. "Good afternoon," the first officer said. "Who called this in?" "I did," Karen said quickly, lifting her chin. "I'm the HOA president. This vehicle is violating our rules. It's chained and abandoned. I had to act to protect the community." The officer's eyes moved to the chain hanging loose and then back to the broken lock. "You cut that?" she asked. Karen did not hesitate. "Yes, it was necessary. He refused to move it. I gave him a deadline. He ignored it." The officer turned to the tow driver. "Did you cut the lock?" "No, ma'am," he said, lifting both hands a little. "She did before I could even decide what to do." The first officer nodded and then turned to the man by the Jeep. "Sir, is this your vehicle?" "Yes," he said. His voice was even and courteous. "It is my vehicle." "Do you have identification?" He handed over his wallet. The officer looked at the ID, then at him, and then at the Jeep again. She asked for the registration, and he provided it. The second officer walked to the patrol car to run the plate. The first officer kept her attention on the scene. She did not look tense. She looked like someone building a clear picture piece by piece. "Sir?" she asked. "Did you give anyone permission to cut this lock or to tow your vehicle?" "No," he said. "I told her very clearly not to touch it." Karen let out a small, sharp laugh. "He says that because he is hiding something inside. I told him this is a neighborhood with standards. We don't allow secret storage." The officer did not respond to the tone. She kept her voice neutral. "Ma'am, please let me gather information." She looked back at the man. "You mentioned last night to a neighbor that this vehicle shouldn't be touched. Why is that?" He met her eyes for a moment, then chose his words as if placing them carefully on a table. "There is sensitive equipment inside that is part of official work. I am not at liberty to say more in public, but I can provide contact information for verification." The second officer returned from the patrol car and spoke softly to the first. She listened, nodded once, and turned back to the man. "Thank you," she said. "Please step a little aside while we make some calls." He stepped back without protest. He was not concerned by the process. It was exactly what he expected. The first officer took out her phone and made a short call, speaking in a professional shorthand, using simple terms that carried weight. She listened, asked one clarifying question, then ended the call and made another. The second officer stood between the Jeep and the tow cable with a quiet presence that said, "Pause better than any shout could." Karen shifted in place. "Officer," she said, "while you make calls, you should know that this vehicle has been here for days with a chain on it. It looks abandoned. I have a duty to keep our neighborhood clean. The rules are clear. No chained vehicles, no storage of items outside. No." The officer held up a hand gently, not to dismiss her, but to slow her down. "I understand your concerns," she said. "I need to verify something first." A couple of minutes passed, slow and steady. The older man with the fishing hat stood quietly at the edge of his driveway, his hat in his hands now. The younger neighbor kept his phone low, recording without moving. The tow driver shifted his weight from one foot to the other and avoided everyone's eyes. He had the look of someone who wanted to be anywhere else. The first officer ended the second call and walked back to the group with a clear, calm expression. She spoke to the tow driver first. "Please unhook the vehicle," she said. "You won't be towing it today?" "Yes, ma'am," he said in a rush of relief. He bent to release the hook and let the winch relax, the cable easing with a soft sound. He pulled the hook away and stepped back. The Jeep settled once more as if grateful to stop moving. The officer turned to Karen next. "Ma'am," she said, "I've confirmed that this vehicle and what's inside are connected to a lawful assignment. The owner's presence and the location are permitted. No further action should be taken to move or open it." Karen blinked. The color rose in her cheeks. "Lawful assignment? What assignment? He told me nothing. He just said it was important. Anyone can say that." "There are times," the officer said gently, "when less is said for good reason. In such cases, it is best not to interfere." Cutting the lock was not appropriate. Karen's voice grew tight. "So I'm the problem now? I'm the one trying to keep the rules. Everyone knows how I care for this community." "I hear that you care," the officer said, "but the lock on someone else's property is not yours to cut. And when a person warns you that specialized equipment must not be touched, the safest step is to call us first and let us check." Her tone stayed calm and clear. "We will need to take a brief statement from you about the cutting of the lock and the attempt to tow. It's routine, but it matters." The word statement landed softly but firmly. Karen's posture changed. She looked down at the broken lock in her palm, as if only now feeling its weight. Around them, the neighbors were very quiet. The older man stared at the lake. The younger neighbor stopped recording and slipped his phone into his pocket. The officer turned to the man by the Jeep. "Thank you for your patience," she said. "I appreciate your warning to everyone to step back. For now, please leave the vehicle as it is. If you need us to document the cut lock for your report, we can do that." "Yes, please," he said. "I'll need a short record of the damage and the tow attempt." The second officer took photos. The cut shank, the loose chain, the mark on the frame where the cable had begun to pull. He did it with quiet care, like someone picking up important pieces and setting them in order. He also took the tow company's information. The driver provided his card and said again that he had not cut the lock and did not want trouble. The officer nodded and told him he could go. The driver gave a quick "thank you" and left with a slow, careful turn of the wheel, as if afraid to stir more dust. When the truck had gone, the lane felt wider and lighter. The water sounds returned. The birds spoke again, and even the breeze seemed to breathe in the trees. The first officer brought out a short form on a small tablet and showed it to Karen. "We'll keep this simple," she said. "Please describe what happened in your own words." Karen held the broken lock and stared at the empty spot where the tow truck had been. She started speaking, then stopped, then tried again. At first, She repeated phrases about the rules and her role. But as she talked, she heard her own voice change. What had felt heroic an hour ago now sounded hurried and rough. She said she believed the vehicle was abandoned. She said she believed the chain proved a violation. She said she thought cutting the lock would not be a big deal if it meant the lane stayed neat. The officer typed without judgment, capturing her words as they came. When Karen finished, the officer read back the summary and asked if it was accurate. Karen nodded, her voice small. The officer gave her a gentle suggestion. "In the future, call us first," she said. "We can check plates and permissions in minutes. It prevents harm and it keeps everyone safe. Sometimes things are not what they look like." Karen glanced at the man. He did not smile. He did not try to make her feel worse. He simply watched quietly, respectful of the process. She looked down at the lock one more time, then handed it to the officer when asked, so it could be added to the report photos. The metal felt colder now. The officers took a short statement from the man as well. He kept it simple. He said he had warned not to touch the Jeep. He said the lock was cut while he was away. He said he received an alert when the chain was cut and returned at once. He did not share details about the equipment, and the officers did not ask for more than they needed. They already had confirmation from their calls. Their focus now was on the basic facts, the tampering, the tow attempt, the outcome. They took his contact information for follow-up and gave him a small card with the case number, the date, and the time. When the paperwork pause ended, the first officer turned to the small group that had formed. A couple of neighbors at their property edges, curiosity mixing with relief. "Everything is under control," she said in a kind, even tone. "Please, go about your day. There's nothing more to see here." The neighbors nodded and drifted away. The older man with the fishing hat gave Karen a gentle look. Not unkind, not smug, just human. "We all learn," he said softly, then tipped his hat and went back to his porch. Karen stood very still. The bright edge that usually shaped her voice had faded. She seemed smaller somehow, like a person who had carried a heavy box labeled, "I must fix this," only to realize it belonged to someone else. The next morning came with soft light across the lake and a thin mist lifting like a curtain from the water. He woke early, not because of worry, but because the quiet called him outside. He brewed coffee, stepped onto the porch, and looked at the Jeep. It sat steady and calm, the new lock shining a little in the morning sun. He felt relief. Not dramatic relief, just the simple comfort that comes when the storm passes and the air turns clear again. He took a sip and listened to birds trading small notes from tree to tree. Life was back to normal, or close to it. A pair of ducks skated across the surface near the dock. Far off, a boat motor coughed to life and then settled into a gentle, He thought about the events of the last 2 days as if he were watching them from a small distance. There had been tension and strong opinions. There had also been careful work, patient words, and people who chose not to make noise when quiet would do. He respected that. He had always believed the right process would hold, and it had. Around 8, the older neighbor in the fishing hat appeared at the end of the lane with a small cooler and a folded chair. He raised a hand in greeting. The man waved back and walked down to meet him. They stood in the first warm beam of sunlight, the way two people do when they know there's something to say, but also that there is no rush. "Morning," the neighbor said. "Lake looks good." "It does," the man agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then the neighbor said, "The group chat was busy last night. Folks were surprised. Some said they didn't. No, there were times when less talk is better. Some said they learned something. Karen didn't say much." He nodded. "Sometimes we all learn at the same time." The neighbor looked at the Jeep and then back at him. "Glad the officers were calm. Glad you were calm, too." "It helped," the man said. I appreciate you telling her to wait. Didn't do much, the neighbor replied with a small smile. But I figured a gentle word could be a start. He lifted the cooler an inch. I'm headed to the dock. If you want to sit a while later, I'll be there. I may join you, the man said. Thanks. They parted, each going about his simple morning. Inside, the man opened his notebook and updated his report. You could call it a log, an organized record, nothing dramatic. He wrote the date and time again, noted that the vehicle had been unhooked without damage beyond the lock, and recorded that he had resecured it with a spare. He included the case number the officers gave him. He included the name of the tow company and the driver's card. He kept it short and clear. He sent the report through the usual channel and closed the notebook. Before he could set down his pen, a quiet message flashed on his phone, a short acknowledgement from a supervisor who rarely used extra words. Received. Good judgment. Stand by. That was enough. He put the phone away and closed the window. Blinds halfway so the inside of the cabin stayed cool. By mid-morning, he saw movement across the lane. Karen came out of her house holding a piece of paper. She did not walk with the same brisk certainty she had shown on earlier days. Her steps were measured and careful. She stood at the edge of his driveway for a moment, as if asking herself if she should turn back, then walked forward until she reached the bottom step. "May I speak with you?" she asked. Her voice was not loud. "Of course," he said, setting down his mug. She stood with both hands on the paper, steadying it. "I have a letter," she said. "Two, actually. One is from me. One is from the HOA board." She looked up. "I want to say I'm sorry. I cut the lock. I pushed things too far. I thought I was protecting our neighborhood. I see now that I wasn't." He didn't rush to fill the quiet. He simply nodded once, letting her keep going. "The board called an emergency meeting last night," she said, holding out the second page. "They decided to make some changes. They wrote this for you, and they asked me to bring it." He took the page, read it slowly, and then read it again. It was direct. It said the board did not authorize the cutting of the lock. It said the board would cover the cost of the damaged lock and any related expense. It said the HOA rules would be updated. If a vehicle appears abandoned or in violation, the HOA must contact the owner in writing and wait 24 hours before taking action, and must call the local police first to verify status before any tow is requested. It said tow companies must be shown written authorization and a case number before they act. It also said, in clear terms, that neighbors were to avoid touching other people's property without permission. He folded the letter neatly. "Thank you," he said. Karen swallowed and handed him the other page. "And this one is from me," she said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't listen when you warned me. I'm sorry I made the lane a stage for my own certainty. I forgot that rules serve people, not the other way around." He took the page and set both letters under a small dish on the porch table so they wouldn't blow away. "I accept your apology," he said. "I know you care about this place." She nodded, but her eyes were a little damp. "I do. Sometimes I think being first to act is the same as doing the right thing." She looked at the Jeep, then back at him. "I will pay for the lock, and if there's a fee for anything else, please send it to me. I already told the board I would." "I appreciate that," he said. "It wasn't only the lock. The tow cable marked the frame, but it's minor and documented. The board's letter covers it." He let a small kindness enter his voice. "Let's focus on the new steps. They will help everyone." She breathed out slowly. "Thank you for not making it worse." "There was no need," he replied. "The right process already spoke." She gave a small, grateful nod and turned to go, then paused and looked back. "If you ever need help with anything around the lane, raking, watchful eyes, anything, I can be useful in quiet ways." "I'll remember," he said kindly. When she had gone, he took a moment to read both letters again, not because he needed to, but because he liked the feeling of a clear end to a muddled story. Paper can be comforting when it holds steady words. He placed the letters in a folder with his notes. Late morning drifted into afternoon. He joined the neighbor with the fishing hat at the dock. They cast lines into the lake and watched the ripples dance. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. A pair of kids rode past on bikes, their laughter bright and light, far across. The water, someone practiced the slow strokes of a paddleboard, knees bent, balance easy. The day found its rhythm again. Around 3, the tow driver returned, this time without the truck. He parked a small sedan near the end of the lane and walked up on foot, hat in his hands, a little unsure. "Sir," he said from a respectful distance. "Yes," the man replied. "I wanted to apologize," the driver said. "I didn't cut the lock, but I still hooked your Jeep when you told me not to. I talked to my boss. We added a new policy last night. We won't touch a vehicle if the owner objects unless there's a written order or a police case number. I figured you should know." The man nodded. "That's a good policy," he said. "It protects you and your customers." The driver looked grateful. "I'm still learning the area," he said. "Didn't realize how fast things can go wrong when you rush." He took a small envelope from his pocket. "My boss asked me to refund the service call fee the HOA paid us. He said to give this to you so you can pass it to them or use it for the new lock, your call." The man took the envelope, thanked him, and said he would forward it to the board with a note. The driver looked relieved, waved, and left. It seemed the lane was teaching everyone the same lesson in their own small way. By evening, the light turned golden again, and the trees held that soft glow that makes everything look kind. He grilled a simple dinner on the porch and ate with the sound of water nearby. He wrote a short message to the board, thanking them for the letter and the policy update, then attached a receipt for the new lock with the refund envelope. He kept the note simple, like everything else he had written during the weekend. As the sky shifted from gold to blue, Karen stepped out of her house again, this time without papers or a clipboard. She carried a small box. She walked to his porch and stopped at the bottom step, waiting. He nodded. She came up carefully and set the box on the table. "I baked," she said, a little shy. "Simple muffins, no message inside, just peace." He smiled in a modest way. "Thank you," he said. "I'll share them with the neighbor at the dock in the morning." "Good," she said, and let out a soft laugh, more honest than the firmness she used to wear like armor. "That man has been kind to all of us for years." She looked at the Jeep one more time and then back at him. "I will remember this weekend. Not as a fight, but as a lesson." She paused. "I'm going to suggest a pause and ask line in the HOA handbook, a short paragraph. Before action, we ask. Before calling for a tow, we call for clarity." "That's a good line," he said. "Short and useful." She left with a small wave. He watched her go, then looked out at the lake, which now held a single silver path from the early moon. A night bird called once from the far shore. He locked the cabin, checked the Jeep one more time out of habit, and stood for a moment with his hand on the cool metal. In another day or two, the equipment would be picked up by people who moved without notice and thanked without ceremony. The Jeep would go back to holding normal things, groceries, tools, fishing gear. That was fine. He liked normal best of all. Back inside, he washed his dish, rinsed his cup, and set both to dry.